In the dead of winter, medieval huts could grow colder than the air outside. Their walls rimmed with frost, icy winds slipping through every crack and gap. Yet somehow, night after night, peasants lay down, slept and woke again to face another day. What happened between dusk and dawn wasn't just about brute endurance. It was about survival techniques and hidden engineering. Tricks few people today have ever heard of. The methods they used weren't primitive. Desperation. They were ingenious systems, improvised with nothing but straw, wood, animal hides, and sheer determination. These quiet survival hacks kept entire families alive through winters that could easily kill the unprepared. This is what it was really, like to survive a freezing winter. Night in medieval Europe. Quick thing before we start. If you actually listen to these regularly, hit like or subscribe. It really does help. And drop a comment with where you're tuning in from and what time it is right now. It's always wild seeing the mix. Some of you having breakfast in London while I'm here in the States, recording this at night. All right, tonight we're going back to medieval Europe, sometime in the 1300s. But first, get comfortable, and I mean really comfortable. Adjust those pillows. Grab a blanket and settle in, because once we step into that hut, you'll feel the cold yourself. Your eyes open to total darkness. The cold hits you first, a sharp, brutal slap across your face, the only part of you exposed to the frigid air. Each breath rises in small, white clouds before fading into the blackness above. Then comes the smell. It's everywhere, thick and inescapable. Smoke that clings to the roof beams. The sour tang of unwashed bodies packed tightly together. The heavy musk of animals sleeping just feet away. And beneath it all, a damp, earthy scent seeping from the very walls. This is the coldest part of the night. That fragile hour just before dawn when the world feels like it's holding its breath. The fire has long since died down to a bed of faintly glowing embers. There is no central heating. No chimney to draw away the smoke. Only a small hole in the roof that sometimes lets out more heat than it keeps in. The hut isn't just a home, it's a survival machine, carefully designed in ways most modern people would never notice. Families huddle together on a raised wooden platform covered with straw, animal skins, and layers of rough wool. The livestock, goats, chickens, sometimes even a cow, are brought inside at night, not for safety alone, but because their body heat adds precious degrees of warmth to the room. You're lying there, sandwiched between siblings, shivering despite the pile of blankets, when someone stirs beside you. It's still hours before sunrise, but the first person awake will rake the embers, coaxing them back to life with kindling carefully saved from the day before. Without that fire, everyone inside risks hypothermia before morning. This isn't just a night's rest, it's a fight for survival, repeated every single evening for months, a delicate balance of heat, breath and hope, deep in the frozen heart of medieval Europe. And let me tell you, what I found was mind-blowing. These people weren't just huddling together and hoping for the best. They had systems, really clever systems, that most history books completely ignore. You sit up slowly, careful not to disturb the heavy layers of scratchy wool and straw beneath you. The hut is tiny, maybe 15 feet across, with walls made of timber frames filled with WL and daub, a mixture of sticks, clay, and animal dung. There's a hole in the roof for smoke to escape, but it also lets in the occasional snowflake that melts before it reaches the floor. The first thing that catches your attention is the floor. It's not flat. There's a depression in the center about 2 ft deep and 40 across. That's where the fire is. Not on the floor like you'd expect, but sunken into it. This isn't some primitive design flaw. This is medieval engineering at its finest. Wait, you might be thinking, why put a fire in a hole? Wouldn't that make it harder to cook over? Actually, this sunken hearth was a stroke of genius. When medieval peasants dug their fires into the ground, they discovered something that transformed their ability to survive winter. See, a regular fire on a flat surface sends heat straight up. Great if you're standing directly over it. Useless if you're anywhere else in the room. But a sunken hearth that changed everything. The physics worked like this. When you put a fire below floor level, the heat flows sideways first before rising. It's like spreading butter on warm bread. The warmth distributes evenly across the entire floor instead of shooting straight up to the ceiling. This meant every corner of the hut got some heat, not just the area directly above the flames. And those stones surrounding the hearth, they're not just to prevent fires from spreading. Those heavy rocks absorbed heat all day and kept radiating warmth hours after the flames died down. They worked like medieval heat batteries, storing enough warmth to keep toes from freezing until sunrise. Okay, but what kind of stones? I literally spent hours researching this because it matters. River rocks. They worked best because they held heat longest, without cracking under thermal stress. Medieval peasants knew this from experience. The wrong kind of stone could literally explode if it got too hot too fast. The old woman tending the fire, you assume she's the grandmother, kneels beside the sunken hearth. Her fingers are gnarled with arthritis, but she moves with the confidence of someone who's done this thousands of times. She stirs the embers with a stick, bringing the fire back to life after its night under a blanket of ash. That's another thing. These fires almost never went out completely. Banking the fire, covering hot coals with ash before bed kept embers alive all night. It was like putting the heat to sleep instead of killing it. Done right, the buried coal stayed warm until morning and could be revived with a bit of kindling and some strategic blowing. In your head, you're doing the math. No fire for 8 hours pre-death by freezing. Medieval peasants couldn't just strike a match to start over. Fire was life, and keeping it alive overnight was a skill passed down through generations. The floor under your feet feels unexpectedly warm. Looking closer, you notice it's not just dirt. There's a layer of ash spread beneath the rushes, covering the floor. This wasn't laziness or poor housekeeping. Ash contains thousands of tiny air pockets that trap and hold warmth much better than plain dirt. Some peasants even mixed ash with clay for better heat retention, creating a thermal barrier against the cold earth. This is actually brilliant, you whisper. And the old woman looks up, obviously not understanding your words, but recognizing the tone of appreciation. She gestures for you to come closer to the fire, which is now crackling to life. The central placement of the hearth was strategic too. It distributed heat equally in all directions. A wall fire would only warm half the space. This central position ensured every sleeping spot got its fair share of heat. You glance up and notice another key feature of the hut: wooden platforms near the ceiling. These elevated sleeping areas weren't just space-saving measures. They were prime real estate during freezing nights. You see hot air rises while cold air sinks toward the floor. Heated air floats up and collects near the ceiling. Those platforms, essentially wooden lofts, captured the warmest air in the hut. The temperature difference between floor level and the raised sleeping area could be several degrees, enough to make the difference between shivering misery and comfortable rest. You watch as children begin to stir on these platforms. They were given the elevated spots because their smaller bodies lost heat faster than adults. The old woman reaches up and helps a young boy, maybe 5 years old, climb down from the loft. His hair is matted, his face smudged with dirt, but he looks well rested and reasonably warm despite the freezing temperatures outside. Well, wait, you say, though nobody understands you. Did people actually sleep comfortably in these conditions? The answer is surprisingly complex. Medieval peasants didn't just survive winter nights. They developed systems to sleep through them with reasonable comfort. The key was in how they built their beds. Looking more closely at the sleeping platforms, you notice they're not solid. There are small gaps between the wooden planks. This clever design allowed heated air to flow up from below while still providing solid sleeping surfaces. It was like sleeping on a warm air grate, except comfortable enough for a full night's rest. The platform beds themselves are layered with thick straw mattresses. Not the thin bedding you might imagine, but substantial constructions. These were thick bundles sewn into cloth casings, creating thousands of insulating air pockets. Each piece of straw was like a tiny thermos bottle, holding warm air in its hollow center. Multiply that by thousands of straws, and you get serious insulating power. The old woman notices you examining the bedding and pulls back a corner of the straw mattress with pride. You can see it's not just a single layer. There are actually 2 distinct bundles with an air gap between them, creating an insulation sandwich. The trapped air prevented heat from transferring downward into the cold platform below. That's at least a foot thick, you murmur, impressed. In cold regions, winter bedding often reached 12 inches deep. Climbing in was like sinking into a warm, lumpy cloud that smelled distinctly like a barn. Not pleasant by modern standards, but far better than freezing to death. Around the edges of the sleeping areas, you notice rolled cloth barriers like pool noodles made of fabric. These sealed the edges of the bedding, preventing heated air from leaking out sideways. It was like caulking gaps around windows, except the windows were beds. The old woman motions for you to help her roll up the bedding. You notice the layering strategy. Heavier materials on the bottom for support. Light, fluffy materials on top for maximum air trapping right next to bodies. The whole family's bedding is piled together in the day to conserve space in the tiny hut. A young woman, probably the mother, emerges from a corner where she's been feeding a baby. She's wearing what looks like a wool cap even indoors. This wasn't a fashion choice. Woolen nightcaps were essential survival gear for peasants who knew heat escapes from heads faster than water through a broken dam. The head thing makes sense, you nod. We lose like 30% of our body heat through our heads. Actually, that's a modern myth. But medieval peasants were onto something important. The head's rich blood supply does make it a significant heat leak. A bare head in winter was like leaving the front door wide open while trying to heat the house. Nightcaps were knitted tight to hug scalps and trap radiating heat. Some covered ears and necks for better retention. The mother adjusts her cap and reaches for a piece of cloth hanging near the fire. She folds it quickly and wraps it around her neck several times before tucking the ends in. Neck sealing was an advanced technique. The neck is like the body's chimney. If you don't block it, heat escapes upward. Another mystery catches your eye. In the corner of the hut, behind a simple wooden barrier, several chickens are huddled together, occasionally clucking softly. There's also what appears to be a goat lying on a bed of straw. These animals weren't just food sources or kept for eggs and milk. They were living heaters. No way, you whisper. They brought livestock inside for warmth. The old woman nods as if understanding your question, pointing to the animals and then hugging herself in a universal gesture for warmth. Farm animals produce body heat constantly, without requiring fuel or maintenance. One goat could raise a small hut's temperature by several degrees, like having a furnace that fed itself and provided milk for breakfast. The arrangement was mutually beneficial. The animals received shelter, while the humans gained a steady heat source that never went out. Different animals offered different heating benefits. Pigs generated intense warmth from their body mass, while chickens worked well in groups, multiplying their heating effect through clustering. The barriers separating animal areas from human sleeping spaces meant heat benefits without having to share beds with livestock. It was like having roommates who couldn't complain, but made barnyard comments at inconvenient hours. The positioning of animals within the hut was strategic too. Larger animals were kept near the center, where their heat could reach everyone. Smaller animals like chickens were placed in corners, creating heated pockets perfect for children to sleep near. You notice something else interesting about the animals. Their bedding, the straw under the goat and chickens, isn't just for their comfort. It serves double duty as hut insulation. Their breath adds warm, moist air that feels more comfortable than dry heat, like having multiple humidifiers that generated heat without electricity. The timing worked perfectly too. Animals are most active in evenings and early mornings, producing peak warmth when humans needed it most. Natural biological rhythms aligned with human heating requirements. But the smell, you think wrinkling your nose? And yes, the odor is strong. A mixture of animal waste, unwashed bodies, smoke, and the earthiness of the structure itself. But freezing to death has a worse odor. Survival meant accepting the less pleasant aspects of effective heating. The old woman catches your expression and laughs, making a similar face and pointing to the animals. Some things transcend language. She shrugs as if to say, yes, it stinks, but we stay warm. The father of the family stirs now, rising from his sleeping spot on the floor near the fire. Unlike the children, adults often slept at ground level to tend the fire during the night. He stretches and immediately moves to check the animals, adding some feed to keep them generating maximum heat. Well-fed animals generated more body heat. It was like biological central heating that also produced eggs, milk, and eventually meat. The arrangement required careful feed planning to maximize heat production during the coldest parts of winter. What's really crazy, you think to yourself, is that this isn't random. This is a system, and you're right. These weren't desperate people doing whatever they could to survive. This was sophisticated engineering using available materials and a deep understanding of heat, insulation, and biology. The entire family is awake now, moving through what is clearly a well-established morning routine. The father adds wood to the fire while the mother prepares a simple breakfast, a pot of something porridge-like, cooking over the flames. The children fold bedding and help with chores. You notice something odd about their movements. They all seem to be following the heat. As the fire grows stronger, family members shift position, capturing maximum warmth while completing their tasks. It reminds you of cats seeking sun patches across a floor. So wait, you say aloud, though they don't understand. Did medieval peasants just shiver all winter and hope for the best? Or did they actually sleep through the night? The answer you discover as the day unfolds is neither. Medieval peasants didn't sleep straight through winter nights at all. They practiced a form of segmented sleep that worked perfectly for their survival needs. As the grandmother stirs the porridge, she begins telling a story to the smallest child. You don't understand the words, but the rhythm is soothing, almost hypnotic. The older woman gestures to the fire, then to the sleeping platforms, then makes a motion like banking the flames. She holds up 2 fingers, then closes her eyes briefly, then opens them wide, then closes them again. It suddenly clicks. She's describing their sleep pattern. First sleep and second sleep, with a period of wakefulness in between. It wasn't poor sleep. It was intentional scheduling that gave time to tend fires during the coldest, most dangerous night hours. The pattern went like this. Bed after sunset for about 4 hours, a natural middle awakening for 1 to 2 hours of activity, then second sleep until dawn. The timing aligned perfectly with natural body rhythms and practical heating requirements. That's actually healthier than how we sleep now. You realize modern research suggests humans naturally tend towards segmented sleep when not influenced by artificial lighting and strict schedules. The grandmother mimes tending the fire during that middle night awakening, then checking on the children, adjusting bedding and other essential tasks. The wakeful period served multiple practical purposes beyond fire management. You realize you're witnessing something remarkable. Not a primitive struggle for survival, but a sophisticated system that worked with nature instead of against it. These peasants weren't just enduring winter. They had mastered it using nothing but careful observation, generational knowledge, and materials they could gather from their immediate environment. As the family sits down to their morning meal, the father opens the door to check the weather. A blast of frigid air rushes in, and you feel your modern appreciation for central heating surge. Outside, the world is covered in frost, trees standing like crystalline sculptures against a pale sky. But inside this humble hut, despite the simplicity and the smell, it's surprisingly comfortable. Not warm by modern standards, certainly, but survivable, even pleasant in its way. The grandmother catches your eye and smiles, nodding toward the fire. She doesn't need words to communicate her pride in this system that has kept her family alive through countless winters. 7 simple techniques working together transformed medieval survival from desperate endurance into strategic comfort. And as you watch this family go about their morning, you realize you've been thinking about medieval life all wrong. These weren't people stumbling through a primitive existence, waiting for progress to rescue them. These were ingenious engineers using physics, biology, and careful observation to solve one of humanity's most persistent challenges: how to stay warm when the world turns cold. The real miracle wasn't just that they survived, it's how well they survived using nothing but what nature provided and what their hands could build. The morning meal is simple but filling. A thick porridge made from barley and a few dried apples from last autumn's harvest. The family eats quickly, no one speaking much. When every calorie matters for survival, eating isn't social time. It's refueling. Can I try some? You wonder. And as if reading your mind, the grandmother pushes a wooden bowl toward you. The porridge is bland, but oddly satisfying, with a nutty flavor and occasional sweet bursts from the dried fruit. No sugar, of course. That's a luxury even most nobles can't afford regularly. The father gets up first, wiping his bowl clean with a piece of hard bread. Nothing goes to waste here. He pulls on a second woolen tunic over the one he slept in and wraps his legs in strips of cloth. Medieval leggings that provide surprising warmth. All right, you're probably wondering why they're wearing all those layers instead of pants, the father says. Okay, he doesn't actually say that, but if he could, he'd explain that multiple thin layers trap heat better than one thick layer. The cloth strips around his legs can be adjusted for different activities and dried quickly if they get wet. Crucial when you only own 2 sets of clothes and freezing to death is a daily threat. The mother hands him a cloth bundle. Lunch, and he heads for the door. There's work to be done regardless of temperature. Fields need maintenance, Animals need tending and wood needs cutting. Winter isn't a holiday. It's just harder work for less reward. Before leaving, he checks the wood pile stacked carefully near the door. It's organized by size and type. Small kindling pieces, medium logs, and a few larger pieces that will burn slowly. This isn't random. Each size serves a specific purpose in fire management. Got enough wood there? You might joke, but the stakes are deadly serious. Running out of firewood in winter was a death sentence. Medieval peasants started collecting the next winter's wood the moment the previous winter ended. The father eyes the pile, mentally calculating if it will last until spring. As he opens the door, another blast of frigid air sweeps in. Outside the world is a grayscale painting. White snow, black tree trunks, and the grey sky promising more snow before nightfall. His breath forms thick clouds as he steps out, closing the door quickly behind him. With the father gone, the hut feels immediately colder. It's not just psychological. You've lost a human heating element. The mother notices too, and adds a small piece of wood to the fire. Just enough to maintain heat, not a bit more. You'd burn through a week's worth of wood in a day if you tried to make the place actually warm by modern standards. The children are getting ready for their day too. The oldest, a girl of maybe 12, helps her younger siblings dress in multiple layers. Even the smallest tasks take longer in winter. Cold fingers fumble with clothing. Stiff fabric resists folding, and no one wants to expose skin to the chilly air. So this is their morning routine, you ask, though they can't understand you. What happens now? The grandmother answers your question through actions. She reaches for a basket in the corner and pulls out wool, some raw and fluffy, some already spun into yarn. Winter was prime time for indoor work. Daylight hours were spent on essential tasks that couldn't be done in the dark, while the longer evenings were dedicated to crafts and repairs. The mother joins her, settling by the fire with a spindle. Her fingers move automatically, drawing out the wool and twisting it into yarn with practiced motions. This isn't just busy work, it's survival. New clothes, repairs to blankets, and items to trade all come from these hours of spinning and weaving. The medieval economy at work, you mutter, watching their practiced movements. The grandmother looks up and smiles, misinterpreting your words as admiration for her skill. She holds out a tuft of wool, offering to teach you. As you awkwardly attempt to copy her movements, you notice something about the wool. It's incredibly oily. Modern wool has been cleaned and processed, but this raw material is still full of lanolin, the natural oil from sheep. It makes your fingers slippery but serves a purpose. The oil provides water resistance and additional insulation to the finished garments. Smart, you say. And the grandmother nods, somehow understanding your meaning across centuries of language difference. The oldest daughter has set up her own work now, using a small loom to weave what looks like the edge of a blanket. Even the younger children have tasks winding yarn into bulls or sorting different colors of wool. What strikes you most is how economical every movement seems. No one expends energy unnecessarily. They sit close to the fire, minimizing the space that needs heating. They work steadily but not hurriedly. Conservation of heat, energy, and resources is built into every action. The youngest boy, perhaps 4 years old, has been watching you with undisguised curiosity. He suddenly darts to a corner of the hut and returns with something clutched in his small hand. He holds it out to you, a roughly carved wooden horse worn smooth from handling. For me, you ask, surprised by the gesture. He nods enthusiastically, pushing it into your hands. Even in survival mode, there's room for play, for sharing, for humanity. The toy is clearly precious to him, probably his only one. Yet he's offering it to a stranger. The grandmother says something to him, her tone gentle but firm. He looks disappointed but nods. The mother explains with gestures. The toy belongs to the boy, but he can show it to you. Ownership means something different when you have almost nothing. As you hand the horse back, you notice its clever design. The legs are slightly weighted at the bottom, so it stands easily. Someone spent hours getting it just right. Precious time carved out of a survival-focused existence to create joy for a child. Midday approaches, marked by the changing angle of the pale sunlight filtering through the small window openings. These aren't glass windows. Glass is far too expensive for peasant homes. Instead, they're openings covered with oiled parchment that lets in some light while keeping out the worst of the wind. The coverings can be opened in summer for ventilation, but remain tightly sealed in winter. The mother sets aside her spinning and moves to the fire. Lunch preparation is minimal. She uncovers a pot that's been sitting at the edge of the embers all morning. Inside is a stew that's been slowly cooking using heat that would otherwise be wasted. Medieval slow cooker technology. What's in the stew? You wonder aloud. Looking closer, you see mostly root vegetables, turnips, carrots, perhaps some parsnips, with what might be small pieces of salted pork for flavor. Meat was precious in winter, used more as seasoning than main course. The grandmother reaches to a small pouch hanging near the fire and sprinkles something into the pot. Dried herbs that immediately release a savory aroma, not just for flavor. Many herbs have preservative properties that help prevent food spoilage, crucial when refrigeration doesn't exist. One of the middle children, a boy of perhaps 7, has been coughing intermittently. The grandmother notices and retrieves another small pouch, this one containing what looks like dried leaves. She drops a pinch into a cup, adds hot water from the pot near the fire and hands it to the boy. Medieval medicine, you guess. Herbs weren't just for cooking. That simple tea might contain thyme, antiseptic properties, elderberry, immune support, or any number of local plants with medicinal uses. Modern pharmaceuticals are isolated versions of compounds these people were already using, albeit less precisely. The boy makes a face at the bitter taste, but drinks obediently. Getting sick in winter could be a death sentence. Everyone knows this, even the children. As the family gathers for the midday meal, you notice something else, their rotating positions. Those who sat closest to the fire this morning now move to outer spots, allowing others to take the warmest places. It's an unspoken system of heat sharing that ensures everyone gets time in the warmest spots. The stew is distributed in wooden bowls, with slightly larger portions going to the father, who returned briefly for the meal, and the oldest children. Those who burn more calories get more fuel. Simple survival math. No one complains about the distribution. This is an unfairness. It's efficiency. They're going to need bread with that, right? You think looking for the standard medieval accompaniment, but bread is surprisingly absent. Baking requires significant fuel for heating an oven, a luxury reserved for perhaps once a week, not daily consumption. The dense porridge and stew provide calories more efficiently. After the meal, the father returns to outside work while the mother and older children prepare for one of the day's most important tasks, water collection. In deep winter, this means breaking ice on a nearby stream or melting snow. Either way, it's dangerous. Cold work that can't be avoided. Water is non-negotiable for survival. 2 of the children grab wooden buckets and follow their mother outside, wrapped in every available layer. The youngest children stay with the grandmother, who immediately puts them to work sorting beans, removing any damaged ones from what might be seed talk for spring planting. You're struck by how there's no idleness. Every moment contains purpose. Every action serves survival, yet it doesn't feel frantic or desperate, just methodical and necessary. With fewer people in the hut, the grandmother banks the fire slightly, preserving precious wood. She notices your interest and gestures for you to come closer. She points to the fire, then to different sections of wood stacked nearby, clearly wanting to explain something. Fire management, you guess? She nods as if understanding, and selects a piece of wood from one pile, dense, heavy oak. Then she points to the flames, holds up her hand and slowly closes it partially. The message is clear. This wood burns slowly, providing steady heat for longer periods. She selects another piece, lighter, perhaps pine, and mimics flames growing quickly. Different woods for different needs, you say, nodding. She's showing you how medieval people didn't just burn whatever they found. They understood which woods burned hot and fast, good for cooking, which burned slow and steady, good for overnight heating, and how to combine them for specific purposes. The youngest boy tugs at your sleeve and points to the corner where several rounded stones sit near the fire. He pantomimes, picking one up carefully, wrapping it in cloth and putting it in a bed. Bed warmers, simple technology but effective. Stones heated by the fire, wrapped in cloth, and placed under bedding would radiate heat for hours. You guys have thought of everything, haven't you? You say, impressed by the ingenuity. The boy grins, clearly enjoying playing teacher to this strange adult who seems to know nothing about basic survival. He leads you to another corner of the hut, where bundles of dried plants hang from the ceiling beams. Some you recognize, lavender, rosemary, sage, while others are unfamiliar. These weren't just for cooking and medicine. Many aromatic herbs repel insects and mask less pleasant smells. Some were added to fires at night to create smoke that deterred pests while making the close quarters more bearable. Medieval aromatherapy that served multiple practical purposes. The door opens, bringing a swirl of cold air and the returning water collectors. The mother and children stamp snow from their feet and quickly close the door. Their cheeks are red with cold, but they've succeeded. The wooden buckets are full of snow that will melt by the fire to become drinking and cooking water. God, that looks miserable, you think, watching them peel off outer layers stiff with ice. The mother's hands are red and chapped from exposure. No waterproof gloves in this century. Wool offers some protection, but gets soaked easily. One thing medieval people understood well was the danger of getting wet in winter. The mother immediately spreads the damp outer garments near the fire. Not too close to prevent burning, but close enough to dry before they're needed again. The afternoon light is already fading, though it's only mid-afternoon. Winter days are short, and darkness brings new challenges. The grandmother moves with increased purpose now, preparing for evening. She sends the oldest girl to check on the chickens in their corner. The birds have been mostly quiet during the day, but they'll need to be settled properly for the night to maximize their heat contribution. You notice the girl adding something to the chicken bedding. More dried herbs, different from the cooking varieties. These have a sharper smell. Pest control. You realize chickens are prone to mites and lice, which can devastate a small flock. The herbs help keep the parasites at bay without harming the valuable birds. The mother is now preparing the evening meal. Another pot of porridge, but this one mixed with dried peas for additional protein. The fire is built up slightly, producing more heat as the coldest hours approach. You realize how precisely they manage the flames, like adjusting a thermostat, but requiring far more skill and attention. I would have died on day one, you mutter, watching the careful calibration of fuel to heat output. The middle boy, who's been coughing, looks worse now. His face is flushed and he moves sluggishly. The grandmother notices immediately and leads him to a spot close to the fire. She places her wrinkled hand on his forehead, frowning at the heat she feels there. Winter illness was a serious threat. With no antibiotics and limited understanding of disease transmission, even minor infections could become deadly. The grandmother reaches for her herb collection again, selecting different leaves this time. She crushes them between her fingers, releasing a sharp medicinal smell before steeping them in hot water. The mother watches with concern but doesn't hover. There's still work to be done, mouths to feed. She can't stop everything for one sick child. No matter how worried she might be, this practical approach to crisis isn't heartlessness. It's survival. As daylight fades completely, the father returns, bringing with him an armload of freshly cut wood. He's exhausted, his breath coming in white clouds, but his first action is to check on the sick boy. He lays a rough hand gently on the child's head, eyes meeting his wife's in silent communication. He needs more blankets, the father says, or wood if you could understand him. The mother nods and retrieves something from a storage chest, a small fur, perhaps rabbit saved for emergencies. She tucks it around the boy who's now shivering despite the fever and nearby fire. The gravity of the situation hits you. This isn't just discomfort or inconvenience. Winter illness in medieval times often meant death, especially for children. The family's concern is palpable, but so is their resilience. They faced this before and have systems in place. The herbs, the carefully preserved fur, the prime spot by the fire. The father hangs his snow-covered outer garments on pegs near the door, as far from the fire as possible. Melting snow near the heat source would create unwanted humidity in the already damp hut. It's another small but significant detail in their winter survival strategy. He sits heavily on a wooden stool, clearly bone-tired from a day of physical labor in freezing conditions. The grandmother hands him a steaming cup. Not just water, you notice, but something herbal, an energy restorative perhaps, or something to prevent the illness that's taken hold of his son. The oldest daughter moves to her father and begins unwrapping the cloth strips from his legs. They're damp with sweat and melted snow, dangerous to leave on as temperatures drop for the night. She sets them near the fire to dry and helps him put on dry replacements. This isn't babying a grown man. It's survival assistance for someone too exhausted to properly care for himself after ensuring the family's needs were met. "Daddy, look what I found," the youngest girl suddenly exclaims, or something similar in their language. She's been remarkably quiet until now, but her excitement breaks through as she pulls something from a pocket in her dress. It's a feather, brilliantly blue, probably from a jay, a small thing, but in the monotonous grey-brown-white palette of winter, it's a burst of vibrant color. The father's tired face breaks into a genuine smile as he accepts the treasure. He says something that makes the girl beam with pride. Even in the grueling existence of medieval winter, there's room for joy, for appreciating beauty. The feather is carefully placed on a small shelf with other found objects. A smooth stone, an unusually shaped piece of wood, a dried flower, a family museum of simple wonders. The evening meal is served as darkness fully envelops the world outside. The family gathers close to the fire, not just for warmth, but for light. The flames provide the only illumination besides a small rush lamp, a simple clay dish filled with animal fat with a wick of twisted plant fibers. Lighting was precious in winter. The rush lamp produces dim, smoky light and an unpleasant smell, but it's used sparingly and only when necessary. Most activities were designed to be done by firelight alone or from memory in near darkness. As they eat, the father tells a story. You can't understand the words, but his gestures and tone make it clear he's recounting something dramatic, perhaps a folk tale or family history. The children watch with wide eyes, momentarily distracted from the sick brother and the perpetual cold. Entertainment when Netflix isn't an option, you think, watching their rapt faces. Storytelling wasn't just pastime, it was cultural preservation, education and community building all at once. Stories got families through long winter nights for centuries before electric lights and digital screens. After the meal, preparations for night begin in earnest. The sun set hours ago, but true bedtime approaches only now. The father adds specific woods to the fire, larger pieces that will burn slowly through the first part of the night. The mother arranges bedding, ensuring the sick boy has the warmest spot without being too close to the fire. The grandmother is preparing something at the edge of the hearth, heating stones that will go into the bedding. She's carefully selected rounded stones with no cracks that might expand and break when heated. She tests each one with a drop of water. If it sizzles too violently, the stone is too hot and might burn the bedding. This isn't casual work. It's precision engineering with the simplest materials. The chickens are settled in their corner, huddled together for warmth. The goat has been brought inside now that temperatures are plummeting. It protests briefly at being tethered in its designated area, but soon settles on the straw bedding prepared for it. Each family member has specific night preparations. The oldest girl checks that all outside garments are properly positioned to dry overnight. The middle children ensure water is available, a critical resource if someone wakes thirsty in the night. The youngest help, spread fresh rushes on areas of the floor that have become damp or dirty during the day. The grandmother is now preparing something special, a warm drink for everyone before bed. It smells sweet and herbal, perhaps containing honey saved from summer. This isn't just comfort. Many herbs promote sleep and relaxation, critical for proper rest during the stressful winter months. As the family settles for the night, they don't simply lie down and expect sleep to come. There's a rhythm to their bedtime routine, a careful choreography developed over generations of winter survival. The father banks the fire, not extinguishing it, but carefully covering hot coals with ash to slow the burn rate while preserving the heat source. It's a delicate balance, and he takes his time getting it exactly right. Too much ash will smother the coals. Too little will let them burn too quickly. Done perfectly, the banked fire will maintain minimal heat through the first sleep period. Each person puts on sleep caps if they weren't already wearing them. Some wrap additional cloth around their necks or over their mouths and noses, breathing warmers that capture exhaled heat and use it to warm incoming cold air. The mother checks each child one last time, tucking bedding around them to eliminate drafts. She pays special attention to the sick boy, whose coughing has settled somewhat, but whose forehead still radiates heat. You watch as the family arranges themselves in their sleeping spots. Children in the lofts near the ceiling, where the warmest air collects. Parents and grandmother on the floor where they contend the fire during night wakings. They don't simply lie down randomly. They position themselves to maximize the benefit of every available heat source. Good night, the father says, or whatever the medieval equivalent might be. One by one, the family members settle into their bedding, creating small nests of relative warmth in the increasingly cold hut. Outside, the temperature continues to drop as full night takes hold. Wind whistles occasionally through tiny gaps in the walls, but the structure holds firm against winter's assault. Inside, the fire glows dimly beneath its blanket of ash. waiting to be revived during the midnight waking that will come in a few hours. As the family drifts toward their first sleep of the night, you're struck by the immense knowledge embedded in their simple actions. Every movement, every decision reflects generations of accumulated wisdom about surviving winter with minimal resources. These weren't people blindly enduring hardship. They were skilled practitioners of survival arts that most modern humans have completely forgotten. The complex heating system, the strategic use of every material, the careful management of resources, all of it speaks to sophistication rather than primitiveness. The last thing you notice before the hut falls silent is the sick boy reaching for his mother's hand in the darkness. She squeezes it gently, a timeless gesture of comfort that bridges the centuries between their world and yours. Some things at least remain unchanged by time. You drift off as well, lulled by the rhythmic breathing of the sleeping family and the occasional soft pop from the banked fire. The hut is never truly dark. The covered embers provide a dull orange glow that casts long shadows across the walls. It's not peaceful silence like modern sleep. There's the constant rustle of straw as people shift position, the occasional cough from the sick boy, and the soft sounds of animals in their corner. It feels like only minutes have passed when your eyes open again. Something has changed in the hut. The fire has dimmed further, and the temperature has dropped noticeably. Your breath forms thicker clouds now. Outside, the wind has picked up, whistling through the thatch and making the walls creak slightly. What woke you was movement. The father is sitting up fully alert, despite having been deeply asleep moments ago. The grandmother, too, is awake, moving with purpose in the near darkness. No one lit a lamp or spoke a word, yet they've risen in perfect synchrony. This is what you heard about earlier, the middle waking. Medieval people didn't sleep straight through from dusk to dawn. Instead, they broke their sleep into two distinct periods with an hour or two of wakefulness between them. The father stands, stretches briefly, and moves directly to the fire. He carefully scrapes back the layer of ash covering the embers, revealing the glowing heart of the banked fire. With practiced movements, he adds small pieces of kindling, then cups his hands and blows gently on the coals. The embers brighten immediately, and tiny flames begin to dance among the new fuel. What's wild is how alert he seems. This isn't a groggy middle-of-the-night bathroom trip. He's fully functional, moving with purpose and precision. The grandmother is the same, checking first on the sick boy before moving to the animals in their corner. So they just wake up like this on purpose, you wonder. It seems so contrary to modern ideas about uninterrupted sleep. The mother stirs now too, rising without hesitation or confusion. She immediately goes to her sick son, feeling his forehead with the back of her hand. Her face tightens with worry. The boy's fever hasn't broken. She exchanges glances with the grandmother, who nods and moves to her collection of dried herbs. You realize this middle night waking isn't just a quirk of medieval sleep patterns. It's a critical survival mechanism. The fire would have died completely by morning without this tending. The sick child might have worsened beyond help without this check. The coldest hours of the night are the most dangerous, and having everyone unconscious through them would be a deadly risk. The father has built the fire back to moderate strength now, careful not to make it too large, and waste precious fuel but sufficient to reheat the hut. The temperature difference is already noticeable. Not warm by any means, but no longer dangerously cold. The grandmother is brewing something for the sick boy. A different mixture than the earlier medicine, this one giving off a sharp, minty smell that cuts through the smoky air. Medieval pharmacology had distinct day and night treatments, each targeting different symptoms or bodily systems. The middle children remain asleep in their lofts, but the oldest girl is awake now too, moving to help her mother with the sick brother. Together they raise his upper body, supporting him as the grandmother brings the herbal drink. The boy is barely conscious, his eyes glassy with fever, but they manage to get some of the liquid into him. They're so calm, you think, watching their methodical care. There's worry in their faces, certainly, but no panic. They've faced winter illness before and have protocols in place, specific treatments for specific hours of the night, roles assigned and understood without discussion. The father checks the door, ensuring it's securely latched against the rising wind. He makes small adjustments to items hanging to dry, moving some closer to the refreshed fire and repositioning others that have dried sufficiently. Nothing is left to chance or overlooked. What's most striking is how this wakeful period feels entirely normal to them. This isn't insomnia or interrupted sleep in the modern sense. It's an intentional, expected part of their night, built into their understanding of how human bodies work. The mother uses this time to rearrange the sleeping furs and blankets around her sick son, creating a better cocoon of warmth. She unwraps a small bundle kept by the fire, what looks like stones wrapped in cloth, and tucks them around his body. These bed warmers, heated earlier in the evening and now reheated during the midnight waking, will help fight the fever by keeping his body at a steady temperature. So wait, you want to ask them, is this normal? Waking up in the middle of the night like this? The answer, if they could give it, would surprise most modern people before artificial lighting extended days and changed sleep patterns. This biphasic or segmented sleep was likely the natural human norm. The pattern emerged not just from necessity, but from the body's natural rhythms when aligned with darkness and light. While the adults work, you notice something about their movements. They're all wearing additional clothing compared to daytime. Sleep caps cover their heads, tight-fitting wool that prevents heat loss through the scalp. Some have cloth wrapped around their necks as well, preventing warm air from escaping upward. The father's hands are covered too, not with bulky gloves that would make fire tending difficult, but with fitted mittens that leave his thumbs free for dexterity. Medieval people understood that extremities, hands, feet, ears lost heat rapidly and could make the entire body feel cold even if the core remained warm. The grandmother is now checking the animals. She places fresh feed for the chickens who stir sleepily at her approach. The goat receives a quick check of its tether and a handful of dried grasses. These animals aren't just passive heat sources. They require care and maintenance to continue providing their warming benefits. Weird chicken feeding time, you think, but there's method to this too. The fresh food stimulates the animal's metabolism, causing them to generate more body heat during the coldest part of the night. It's like adding fuel to a living furnace. The father has completed his fire maintenance and now moves around the hut's perimeter, checking for drafts. He pauses at one spot, where the wind seems to be finding entry, takes a handful of straw mixed with clay from a container near the door and presses it into the gap. Draft-proofing was an ongoing winter battle, with new leaks appearing as structures shifted in freezing and thawing cycles. What's fascinating is how this middle night period creates a different kind of consciousness. Not the full alertness of day, nor the deep unconsciousness of sleep, but something in between, a liminal state where essential tasks get done while the mind remains partly in dream space. The mother finishes tending to her sick son and sits by the fire, picking up some mending work she set aside earlier. The quiet hours of middle night were often used for small, simple tasks that required minimal light repairs to clothing, simple crafts, or food preparation for the coming day. The father joins her, not speaking, but clearly comfortable in the shared silence. He takes out a small knife and a piece of wood, working on what might become another toy, or perhaps a replacement handle for a tool. The soft scrape of the blade against wood joins the quiet symphony of night sounds. The fires crackle, sleeping breaths in the wind outside. The grandmother has completed her rounds and now settles near the sick boy, watching his sleep with the focused attention of someone who has nursed many through winter illness. Her G&L'd hands hold a strand of beads, perhaps a rosary or some other focus for prayers or meditation. Medieval night wakings often had spiritual dimensions as well as practical ones. So what are they actually doing with this time, you wonder, watching the quiet industry around you? Research suggests this middle waking served multiple purposes beyond fire tending. It was time for reflection, for processing the day's events or the content of first sleep dreams. Some historians believe it was an important time for memory consolidation and problem solving, the brain working through challenges in this unique state of consciousness. It was also essential social time. In the crowded, busy daylight hours, deep conversation might be impossible. But in the quiet intimacy of middle night, with most children asleep and work set aside, adults could speak of matters too private or complex for daytime discussion. As if confirming your thoughts, the mother and father begin a quiet conversation. Their voices are low, barely audible, but their serious expressions suggest important matters, perhaps concerns about the sick child, plans for stretching winter supplies or decisions about spring planting. This wasn't idle chat, but essential family governance happening in the only time available for it. The oldest girl has completed her tasks and now sits with her grandmother, listening as the older woman shows her something about the medicinal herbs. Knowledge transfer happened in these moments. Critical survival skills passed from generation to generation in the quiet hours when younger children slept and distractions were minimal. About an hour has passed in this middle night activity when you notice the first signs of transition. The father yawns widely, stretches and begins preparing for second sleep. He banks the fire again, though not as deeply as earlier. The coldest part of the night is still ahead, and more heat will be needed until dawn. The mother follows suit, checking once more on her sick son before returning to her sleeping place. The grandmother is the last to settle, after placing one more warmed stone near the sick boy. One by one, they wrap themselves in their bedding, adjust their sleeping caps and position themselves for the second sleep period. What's remarkable is how natural the transition appears. There's no tossing and turning, no struggle to return to sleep as modern insomniacs might experience. They slip back into sleep with the ease of people following their body's natural rhythms, rather than fighting against them, and yet not everyone returns to sleep. The grandmother remains awake, settling into what appears to be a watch position near the sick child. In families with serious illness, night watches would rotate, ensuring someone was always alert to changes in condition or needs for additional care. Before she fully settled, the grandmother did something you didn't notice earlier. She shifted her position slightly, moving to where the father had been sleeping previously. This wasn't random. That spot had been warmed by his body heat and would stay comfortable longer than an unused section of floor. Heat mapping, the strategic use of body warmth, was another survival technique. Family members would sometimes rotate positions during the night, each taking advantage of the residual warmth left by others. Nothing was wasted, not even the heat generated by sleeping bodies. Outside, the night has deepened. The wind has settled somewhat, but the temperature continues to drop. This is the true test of all those survival systems. The hours before dawn, when cold reaches its peak, and bodies are at their most vulnerable. The sick boy coughs in his sleep, a harsh sound that immediately brings his grandmother's full attention. She places a gentle hand on his chest, feeling the rise and fall of his breathing, then adjusts his coverings again. The depth of care is evident in every movement. This isn't clinical or detached, but deeply personal. You drift towards sleep yourself, lulled by the renewed quiet of the hut. The fire pops occasionally as a particularly resinous piece of wood heats, and somewhere in the distance, an owl calls. A hunter taking advantage of the deep night. Your modern mind struggles to fully comprehend this medieval relationship with night and sleep. We think of sleep as a single block of time, interrupted only by problems or disturbances. But for most of human history, this segmented pattern was normal, perhaps even optimal for the human brain and body. The second sleep period feels different from the first, deeper, somehow more restful. Modern research suggests this biphasic pattern might actually offer better quality rest than the consolidated 8 hours we now consider ideal. The middle night waking allowed for hormone regulation, stress processing, and a kind of mental reset before the second sleep cycle. Hours pass in this deepened sleep state. The hut grows colder as the night approaches its darkest point, but the family's systems hold against the chill. The banked fire maintaining minimal heat, the layered bedding trapping body warmth, the sleeping bodies generating their own heat beneath caps and wrappings. You're awakened again by movement, less organized this time, more urgent. The quality of darkness has changed. It's still night, but somehow different. The deep black has shifted to a dark blue that suggests the earliest approach of dawn, though sunrise itself is still hours away. The grandmother is standing, moving quickly to the sick boy's side. The child is thrashing in his blankets, caught in the grip of a fever spike. His face is flushed, his breathing rapid. This is the crisis point that often comes in the coldest hours before dawn, when the body's resources are most depleted. The mother wakes instantly at the grandmother's soft call. She moves to her son without hesitation, her face tight with worry but her movements confident. Together, the women unwrap the outer layers of the boy's bedding, counterintuitive in the freezing cold but necessary to bring down his dangerous fever. The father wakes next, immediately moving to rebuild the fire. More heat is needed now, not for comfort, but to boil water for the stronger medicines this crisis requires. His movements are swift but controlled. This isn't their first experience with night fever. Even in crisis, there's no wasted energy, no panic. Each person has a role understood without discussion. The mother supports the boy's head and shoulders, helping him drink small sips of water. The grandmother prepares herbs with shaking hands, not from uncertainty but from age and the cold. The father maintains the fire at precisely the right strength for the medicine preparation. The oldest girl wakes and immediately moves to care for the younger children, who have begun to stir at the unusual activity. She gathers them in the furthest corner of the loft, telling them a quiet story to keep them calm and out of the way of the urgent care below. You're witnessing medieval crisis management at its most efficient. A family unit functioning as a single organism, each part performing its essential role without hesitation or confusion. There's fear in their eyes. Certainly winter fever killed countless children before modern medicine, but there's also determination and deep knowledge. The grandmother has prepared something different now, a pus of herbs mixed with rendered animal fat. She spreads this on a cloth and places it on the boy's chest, then wraps him again but less heavily than before. The sharp smell suggests mustard, or another warming herb that will draw heat to the surface and away from his core. Fever management was sophisticated, even without thermometers or modern understanding of infection. They couldn't name the bacteria or viruses, but generations of observation had taught them which symptoms responded to which treatments, when to warm and when to cool, which herbs fought infection and which reduced inflammation. "Come on, little guy," you whisper, caught up in the drama despite yourself. The family's concern is contagious, their focused care drawing you into their circle of worry and hope. The boy's breathing eases slightly as the pus does its work. The violent thrashing calms to occasional restless movements. The mother strokes his forehead, singing a soft, repetitive melody that might be a lullaby or a prayer. In this world, the two were often indistinguishable. Outside, the first birds have begun their pre-dawn chorus, though the sky remains dark. This twilight period before true dawn has its own character. Not quite night anymore, but not yet day. The family marks this transition with subtle shifts in their activities. The crisis appears to be passing as the night itself wanes. The father adds more substantial wood to the fire, building it higher than it's been all night. Morning fire serves different purposes. Cooking, heating water for the day's needs, driving out the deep chill that has settled into every corner during the long darkness. The grandmother checks the sick boy once more, her expression softening slightly. She nods to the mother, a good sign, a message of cautious hope. The worst has passed, at least for now. The boy sleeps more peacefully, his breathing deeper and more regular. The mother looks exhausted but relieved. She hasn't slept since the crisis began, maintaining her vigil through the darkest hours. Now as the first hint of grey lightens the eastern sky, she allows herself to slump slightly. The immediate danger past. They made it, you think? Surprised by your own emotional investment in this family. You've known for less than a day. But survival was always communal in this world. One person's crisis affected everyone. One person's skills benefited all. The interconnectedness was both practical and deeply human. As true dawn approaches, the hut begins its daily transformation. The fire burns brighter, pushing back the night's deep chill. The animals stir in their corner, the chickens beginning their morning sounds, the goat shifting on its straw bed. The younger children climb down from the loft, moving automatically to the warmest spots near the now blazing fire. The grandmother begins breakfast preparation. Her movements slower than the previous day, but no less precise. The crisis has taken a toll on her aging body, but her role doesn't allow for rest yet. The porridge must be made, the day's water heated, the fire maintained at the right strength for morning needs. The father prepares for another day outside. The animals must be tended, wood gathered, repairs made. Winter doesn't pause for illness or exhaustion. The survival cycle continues regardless of what transpired in the night. The oldest girl has taken over care of the sick boy, allowing her mother a brief rest before the day's work begins in earnest. She changes the pus with practiced movements, her young face serious with responsibility. This too is part of her education, learning to care for the ill, to recognize signs of improvement or decline, to prepare the remedies her grandmother has taught her. And so the medieval day begins again, shaped by the cold, defined by survival needs but rich with human connection and accumulated wisdom. Another day of winter to endure, another night to prepare for, another link in the long chain of survival that stretches from these people to you. Centuries later, in your warm, electrically heated home, the sick boy opens his eyes briefly. looking directly at you with a gaze that seems to bridge the centuries. There's recognition there, acknowledgement of shared humanity, despite the vast differences in your lives and worlds. Then his eyes close again, as he drifts back to healing sleep, surrounded by the family whose knowledge and care might just see him through to spring. Morning brings a different quality of light to the hut, thin and grey, filtering through the oiled parchment coverings on the small windows. Outside, fresh snow has fallen during the night, muffling sounds and creating that peculiar winter silence where each noise stands out with crystalline clarity. The sick boy is sleeping more peacefully now, his fever having broken sometime in the pre-dawn hours. The grandmother sits beside him, her own eyes closed in a brief moment of rest after the night's crisis. Her hands resting on her lap are a map of years. Knuckles swollen from arthritis, skin thinned and spotted with age, yet still capable of the precise work of healing. Did anyone actually get any sleep last night? You wonder, watching the family move through their morning routines with heavy eyes and slower movements. The crisis has depleted their energy reserves, but the work of survival doesn't pause for recovery. The father eats his morning porridge standing up, already dressed for outside work. His face shows the strain of interrupted sleep. But there's no complaint, no mention of exhaustion. When every winter day is a battle against the elements, personal discomfort becomes background noise, acknowledged, but not dwelled upon. "I'll check if Thomas can spare some honey," he says to his wife, or something similar in their medieval language. For the boy, she nods gratefully. Honey wasn't just a sweetener in medieval times. It was medicine, particularly effective for respiratory illnesses. Its antibacterial properties, though not understood in those terms, had been observed for centuries. But honey in deep winter was a precious resource, saved for special needs or traded at high value. Thomas? Who's Thomas? You wonder. You're about to find out. The father finishes his meal quickly and heads for the door, pausing only to check on his son and exchange a few quiet words with the grandmother. Then he's gone, taking with him a small cloth bundle, likely something to trade for the honey. The mother moves to the fire, adding the morning's water to be heated. The oldest girl has taken over breakfast distribution, ladling porridge into wooden bowls for her younger siblings. There's a rhythm to their movements, a choreography of survival that continues regardless of circumstance. A sharp knock at the door breaks the quiet routine. The mother straightens, wiping her hands on her apron before moving to answer it. The door opens to reveal a woman of similar age, wrapped in multiple layers against the cold. Her cheeks are red from the short walk between huts, her breath clouding in the freezing air. Sarah, the mother says, or whatever name would have been common in their time and place. The women embrace briefly before the visitor is ushered inside. The door quickly closed against the cold. The visitor immediately notices the sick boy and moves toward him, her face creased with concern. She exchanges words with the grandmother, who nods wearily and makes room for the newcomer to check the child herself. What you're witnessing isn't just a neighborly visit. In medieval villages, certain women became known for their healing skills. Not formal midwives or physicians, but respected community healers, whose knowledge supplemented each family's basic medical abilities. This woman appears to be one such person, her confident assessment of the boy suggesting experience with winter illnesses. She reaches into a small bag hanging at her waist and pulls out a bundle of dried herbs, different from those the grandmother has been using. The two women confer, comparing approaches, combining knowledge. There's no competition here, just collaboration toward the shared goal of the child's recovery. "I told my Jacob to help your man with the north fence," the visitor says to the mother. Again, not the exact words, but the meaning is clear from her gestures and the mother's grateful nod. This is medieval community in action. Word of the family's crisis has spread, and help has materialized. Not just medical knowledge, but practical assistance with the father's daily tasks. Ensuring survival work continues while the family manages the illness. The visitor doesn't stay long. She has her own household to run, but her brief presence has changed the atmosphere in the hut. The shared burden feels lighter, the mother's face less strained, the grandmother more confident in her treatments, now that they've been confirmed by another knowledgeable woman. As the visitor departs, she leaves behind the bundle of herbs and something else, a small clay pot that the mother receives with obvious gratitude. Honey, perhaps, or another remedy too precious to be spared, without serious need. Well, that was nice of her, you think, watching the door close behind the departing neighbor. But this wasn't mere niceness. In medieval winter, community cooperation wasn't optional. It was essential survival strategy. Today your child is sick. Tomorrow it might be your neighbor's. The shared knowledge and resources created resilience no single family could achieve alone. The oldest girl has taken the younger children outside for their morning toilet needs, a cold but necessary journey to the household's designated waste area. Likely a simple pit latrine at a sensible distance from the hut. Modern bathroom privacy is a luxury these people never expected, especially in winter, when speed and efficiency trumped modesty. With the children momentarily absent, the mother and grandmother prepare a fresh treatment for the sick boy. The new herbs are crushed and steeped in hot water, creating a tea that smells sharply medicinal. The grandmother supports the boy's head, while the mother helps him drink the bitter liquid. He grimaces but swallows obediently. Even young children understood the seriousness of winter illness. The hut is warming now as the morning fire reaches full strength. It's still cold by modern standards. You'd probably set your thermostat around 50 degrees if you were trying to replicate this temperature. But after the deep chill of night, it feels almost comfortable. A different visitor arrives. An older man, stooped with age but still moving with purpose. He stamps snow from his feet before entering, bringing with him the smell of woodsome smoke from a different fire and the sharp winter air. The grandfather, perhaps, or an elder from another household. His visit has a different purpose. He speaks to the mother while looking at the ceiling beams, gesturing upward with concerns evident in his expression. She nods, pointing to areas where the thatch seems thinner or the supporting structure shows signs of strain. Winter brought structural challenges to medieval homes. Snow weight could collapse poorly maintained roofs. Freeze-thaw cycles could weaken daub walls. This elder appears to be conducting an assessment, sharing his experience of building maintenance to prevent disaster. His careful examination of the roof structure and walls is another form of community support. Early intervention could prevent catastrophic failure during the worst of winter. "I'll send the boys tomorrow," he tells the mother, making what seems to be a promise of labor help. Roof repairs, even minor ones, weren't jobs. And with the father focused on his sick son and essential daily tasks, the community steps in to fill the gap. The older man accepts a small cup of something hot, likely not the precious herbs saved for the sick child, but perhaps a tea made from pine needles. Such teas provided vitamin C and other nutrients crucial for winter health, staving off scurvy and boosting immune systems taxed by cold and limited diet. Before leaving, the elder pauses by the sick boy, placing a weathered hand gently on his forehead in what might be a blessing or simply a grandfatherly gesture of concern. These momentary connections, small touches, brief visits, shared knowledge formed the social fabric that made survival possible. As the morning progresses, the mother begins preparations for the midday meal. She retrieves items from various storage containers around the hut. Dried beans that have been soaking since yesterday, preserved vegetables from underground storage, a small piece of salted meat for flavor. Medieval food preservation was sophisticated out of necessity. Nothing edible could be wasted, and summer's abundance had to stretch through winter's scarcity. The vegetables, likely turnips, carrots, and cabbage, had been stored in straw-lined pits that stayed just above freezing. The technique kept them edible, if somewhat shriveled, for months. The meat came from full slaughtering, preserved through smoking and salting. Fresh meat in deep winter was rare, unless a hunt was successful, which became increasingly unlikely as wild animals struggled with their own winter survival. Most protein now came from preserved sources, smoked meats, dried fish, aged cheese, if the family was fortunate enough to have milk-producing animals. The grandmother has rallied somewhat after her brief rest and now supervises the youngest children, who have returned from their outdoor expedition, red-cheeked and hungry. She sets them to simple tasks, sorting beans, breaking preserved vegetables into pot-sized pieces that keep them occupied while contributing to the household work. The sick boy stirs again, more alert than earlier. The mother immediately moves to his side, helping him sit up slightly to drink some of the clear broth she skimmed from the cooking pot. Maintaining hydration was crucial for fever recovery, and even weak broth provided both liquid and nutrients. "Oh, mama," he says, a word recognizable in almost any language, especially when spoken by a child seeking comfort. The mother smooths his hair back from his forehead, murmuring reassurances as she checks his temperature with her lips pressed to his skin, a method mothers have used across centuries to gauge fever. The door opens again, bringing a swirl of cold air and the father's return. His arms are full of firewood, and something hangs from his belt, a pair of rabbits, their fur white with winter camouflage. The successful hunt brings a change to the family's energy. Fresh meat in winter was both nutrition and celebration. Yaub spotted them near the old oak, the father explains as he hands the rabbits to his wife. The community support has paid dividends beyond the immediate help with tasks. Extra eyes in the forest meant better hunting chances. And by custom, successful hunters shared information about game sightings with others. The father moves immediately to check on his son, relief visible in his face when he sees the boy awake and somewhat improved. He produces something from his pocket, a small clay pot that must contain the honey he sought from Thomas. The grandmother receives it with a nod of approval, immediately incorporating some into the next dose of herbal medicine. The atmosphere in the hut has shifted with the father's return and the boy's improvement. There's a cautious optimism now, a sense that the crisis is passing. The rabbits represent unexpected bounty, the honey a specific medicine for the child's recovery, and the continued community support a buffer against winter's hardships. The mother hands the rabbits to her oldest daughter, who takes them outside for the initial preparation. Butchering was not segregated from children's awareness in medieval life. Even young ones understood where food came from and often participated in its preparation from earliest ages. The girl will remove the fur saved for small projects. Clean the carcasses and preserve any parts not used for immediate cooking. Nothing would be wasted. The blood would be collected for sausage or pudding, the organs eaten first as they spoiled quickest, the bones saved for broth, and even the sinew kept for thread or binding material. The fur would become mittens or hat lining, or perhaps a comfort item for the smallest child. The midday meal preparation continues with the prospect of fresh meat, adding variety to the planned stew. The mother adjusts her cooking accordingly, setting aside a portion of the rabbit meat to be preserved for future meals. Even in relative bounty, the medieval mind stayed focused on future scarcity. More village children appear at the door, friends of the older children coming to check on the sick boy, and perhaps hoping for tasks that might earn them a taste of the rabbit stew. The mother sends them on small errands, bringing a bucket of snow to melt for water, carrying a message to another household, helping the oldest daughter with the rabbits. These children move through the winter landscape with confident familiarity. They know which paths stay passable after snowfall, which icicles indicate roof leaks that might weaken structures, which smoke patterns from chimneys suggest households needing assistance. Their environmental literacy is instinctive, absorbed through observation rather than formal teaching. As midday approaches, the hut fills with savory smells that make even the sick boy perk up slightly. The stew bubbles at the edge of the fire, vegetables softening and flavors melding. The grandmother has prepared a special portion for the sick child, mostly broth with tiny bits of meat, the most digestible combination for someone recovering from fever. The father has been making repairs to a wooden tool, perhaps a shovel or hoe, replacing a cracked handle with a piece of seasoned wood he's been saving for this purpose. The work keeps him near the fire and his sick son while still accomplishing necessary maintenance. Medieval winter was repair season, time to fix everything that would be needed when spring's work began in earnest. The youngest children have been playing a simple game with pebbles and a marked piece of leather, something like modern tic-tac-toe, but with different rules. Their laughter provides counterpoint to the serious work of survival, a reminder that even in hardship, humanity finds space for play and joy. The midday meal is served as the weak winter sun reaches its highest point, still pitifully low in the northern sky, providing minimal warmth but crucial psychological comfort with its light. The family gathers around the fire, each accepting their portion with murmured thanks or silent nods. The sick boy manages a few spoonfuls of broth and tiny bites of rabbit before tiring. It's a good sign. Appetite returning suggests recovery beginning, but he's still weak from the night's fever. The grandmother helps him lie back down, tucking the bedding around him with practiced care. Conversation during the meal is minimal. Practical exchanges about afternoon tasks, updates on the roof concerns, plans for using the rabbit remains. Medieval mealtimes weren't dominated by social chatter, as modern ones often are. Food was fuel. Eating was necessary work, and conversation served specific purposes rather than entertainment. After eating, the father prepares to return outside. There's still daylight, and essential tasks remain. Checking animal shelters, gathering more firewood, perhaps setting snares in hopes of additional game. Winter days were short, and every moment of light had to be used efficiently. Before leaving, he confers briefly with his wife and mother-in-law. Their faces are serious, as they discuss what appears to be a change in plans. The boy's illness has disrupted normal patterns, requiring redistribution of tasks. The mother will now handle some outdoor work normally done by the father, allowing him to focus on heavier labor, while she remains closer to the hut and her sick child. This flexibility was essential to medieval survival. Rigid gender roles existed in many contexts, but winter crisis demanded practical adaptations. When survival hung in the balance, capability trumped convention. The mother is clearly experienced, with the outdoor tasks she's taking on, suggesting this isn't the first time such adjustments have been necessary. As the father leaves again, the grandmother oversees the meal cleanup, a simple process of scraping bowls clean and returning them to their storage shelf. The cooking pot remains at the fire's edge, the remaining stew continuing to simmer for the evening meal. The oldest daughter takes the used bowls outside to scour them with snow, an efficient cleaning method that required no precious heated water. The hut settles into afternoon rhythm. The grandmother returns to her spinning, the younger children to quiet play or simple tasks. The sick boy drifts between sleep and wakefulness, each period of alertness slightly longer than the last. Another good sign. The mother prepares for her outdoor tasks, layering additional clothing and wrapping her legs and feet carefully. Proper preparation for cold exposure was essential knowledge. The difference between discomfort and dangerous frostbite often came down to how garments were layered and secured. "I'll be just behind the storage shed," she tells the grandmother, or words to that effect. "Send Marta if he worsens." Marta must be the oldest daughter, currently feeding kitchen scraps to the chickens in their corner. The mother's outdoor work will keep her within earshot of the hut, close enough to return quickly if needed, but far enough to accomplish necessary tasks. This balance of responsibility was constant in medieval parenting, especially during winter, when both childcare and survival work intensified in importance and difficulty. As the door closes behind her, the hut feels different again, quieter, with 2 adults gone, more focused on maintenance than active work. The grandmother hums softly as she spins, the repetitive motion and sound almost hypnotic in the afternoon dimness. The younger children have settled into that peculiar winter state. Not quite napping, but energy conserved, movements minimal, voices lowered. This conservation mode was another winter survival strategy. Between active work periods, medieval people often entered a state of reduced activity, not true hibernation, but a similar energy-preserving response to cold and limited food. Modern, people rarely experience this state with constant artificial light, stable temperatures, and abundant food disrupting seasonal rhythms. The afternoon deepens, shadows lengthening as the sun begins its early retreat. The light through the small windows shifts from grey to amber, the last direct rays before sunset. Time moves differently here, marked by light quality, fire needs, and body rhythms rather than mechanical clocks. The father returns with more firewood and something else. News that travels through his expression before he speaks. Something has happened in the village. The grandmother straightens, her hand stilling on the wool as she waits for him to explain after he set down his burden. "Ella's time has come," he says simply. The midwife is with her. Birth in winter brought special dangers and needs. The grandmother immediately begins gathering items from her stores. Herbs, clean cloths, a small pottery container of what might be rendered fat for a birthing salve. Though not the primary midwife, her experience will be valuable, especially in winter when complications carried higher risks. "I'll go when Martha returns," she tells the father, who nods understanding. The oldest daughter was capable of managing the household and sick child temporarily, but the grandmother wouldn't leave until this relief arrived. The news has shifted the hut's energy again. Birth, like illness, was a community event in medieval villages. Resources would be redirected, tasks redistributed, and support mobilized to protect both mother and newborn during the dangerous winter entry into life. The sick boy has awakened at the activity, his eyes tracking his father's movements around the hut. "Is the baby coming?" he asks weakly, a question that transcends language barriers in its childish curiosity. The father smiles, the first full smile you've seen from him. "Yes," he answers, sitting beside his son. "Another cousin for you, God willing." The family connections are becoming clearer. Ella must be related, perhaps the father's sister or the mother's. The village seems to be a network of interconnected families, sharing resources and support across household boundaries when needed. The father uses this moment of connection to help his son drink more of the honey-laced medicine. The boy complies more willingly now, either from improved condition or interest in the birth news. Small motivations could make significant differences in recovery, something medieval healers understood well from observation. The hot door opens again, admitting the mother and oldest daughter returning together. Arms full of gathered materials, some root vegetables unearthed from storage pits, kindling collected from the woodland edge, and a bundle of something that might be reed or straw for craft work. They immediately sense the change in atmosphere, looking to the father for explanation. When he shares the birth news, they too begin preparations. The mother setting aside a portion of the day's bread for the birthing household. The daughter checking stores of clean rags that might be needed. The grandmother explains her plan to assist after ensuring household stability. The mother nods approval. Though younger, she clearly shares authority in these decisions. Experience and capability, determined leadership more than strict age hierarchies, especially in practical matters of survival and community support. As the winter day fades toward evening, the family adjusts to this new development while maintaining their own recovery from the night's crisis. The sick boy continues to improve gradually. The household tasks proceed with necessary modifications, and the community beyond the hut walls shifts its resources to support a winter birth. The medieval day cycles toward its close, not with defined work hours or scheduled activities, but with the natural progression from daylight to firelight, from active labor to evening conservation, from individual household focus to broader community awareness. Each transition seamless, each adjustment made without complaint or confusion, each person understanding their role in the intricate dance of winter survival. Evening approaches with its own distinct rhythm. The pale winter sun vanishes behind the treine, taking with it what little warmth it provided. Temperature drops immediately. You can almost feel the cold rushing in to reclaim the world as darkness returns. Inside the hut, preparations for night begin with practiced efficiency. The father builds up the fire, carefully selecting wood pieces for the evening burn. The morning and midday fires serve different purposes than the evening blaze, which needed to provide both cooking heat and warmth for the family's main gathering time. He chooses dense oak pieces that will burn slowly and steadily, supplemented with a few Rhenus pine chunks for brighter light. "Will you go to help, Ella?" he asks the grandmother, who nods as she wraps an additional shawl around her shoulders. Though elderly, her skills are needed, and age doesn't excuse anyone from community contribution when lives hang in balance. "Martha knows what to do for the boy," she answers, glancing at the oldest daughter, who is already preparing the evening's herbal treatment. The knowledge transfer is clear. The grandmother has taught the girl well, ensuring healing skills pass to the next generation. The sick boy is sitting up now, propped against folded bedding, his eyes brighter and more alert than earlier. The crisis has passed, though recovery will take days. He watches the activity around him with the interest of a child who's been confined to bed, but whose mind remains active. "When will the baby come?" he asks his grandmother as she checks his forehead one last time before departing. "Babies come in their own time," she answers with the wisdom of someone who has witnessed hundreds of births. "Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. We wait and help." The practicality of her response reflects medieval understanding of childbirth. Unpredictable, dangerous, but following patterns that experienced women recognized and worked with, rather than fought against. No inducing labor or scheduled deliveries, just patient attendance to natural processes with interventions only when absolutely necessary. The grandmother gathers her bundle of birth-helping supplies, herbs, cloths, the small pot of salve, and prepares to depart. Before she goes, the mother hands her a small cloth package. The rabbit liver, she explains, for strength. After the grandmother nods approval at this thoughtful offering, organ meats were prized for their concentrated nutrition, particularly important for women after childbirth, when blood loss and exhaustion threatened recovery. The rabbit's timely arrival now seems providential, rather than merely fortunate. As the grandmother leaves, wrapped in every available layer against the deepening cold, the household reconfigures itself again. The mother takes over supervision of evening activities. The oldest daughter monitors her sick brother, and the father maintains the fire while repairing a leather shoe by firelight, a task impossible in daylight hours when more critical work required attention. "I'll check on you before midnight," the mother tells the grandmother at the door, a reference to that middle waking that structured medieval winter sleep. Each household member had specific night responsibilities, and these needed redistribution, with the grandmother absent. Evening brings its own specific tasks. The mother stirs the pot that's been simmering all day. Now a thicker stew as liquid evaporated and flavors concentrated. The oldest daughter sets out wooden bowls and spoons. No plates or multiple courses in this meal service, just the practical delivery of essential nutrition. The youngest children have been mostly quiet during the afternoon's low-energy period, but grow more animated as evening meal approaches. Their play becomes more active. A game involving a ball made from scrap cloth and a target drawn in ash on the wall furthest from the fire. Not so wild, the father cautions as the ball flies close to a carefully preserved store of dried herbs. Resources are too precious for careless damage, even by playing children. The oldest girl has finished preparing her brother's medicine and now helps serve the evening meal, ladling stew into the family's bowls. The portions are carefully calibrated. Largest for the father, whose outdoor work burns most energy, substantial for the mother and older children, modest for the smaller ones, and a special portion for the sick boy that contains more broth than solids. "I'm hungry," the sick boy says, the first expression of appetite since his fever broke. His mother smiles at this positive sign. Hunger indicated healing in medieval medical understanding. The body's recognition that it needed fuel to rebuild strength. Mealtime conversation is more animated than at midday. The father shares news gathered during his wood collection, updates about other families, weather observations, signs of wildlife movement that might indicate hunting opportunities. Medieval information networks operated through such casual exchanges, person to person, essential knowledge moving through communities without written records. Thomas saw wolf tracks by the North Stream. He mentions between spoonfuls of stew. This isn't idle chatter, but vital safety information. Predator movements affected everything, from travel paths to livestock protection to children's play boundaries. The mother nods, mentally adjusting her plans for tomorrow's water collection. "We'll take the east path." Then she decides the detour a small price for safety. You notice how the children listen attentively to this exchange, absorbing crucial environmental knowledge without formal instruction. Their education was embedded in daily life.